The Ideal of Human Unity. Chapter 34. The Religion of Humanity. A religion of humanity may be either an intellectual and sentimental ideal, a living dogma with intellectual, psychological, and practical effects, or else a spiritual aspiration and rule of living, partly the sign, partly the cause of a change of soul in humanity. The intellectual religion of humanity already to a certain extent exists, partly as a conscious creed in the minds of a few, partly as a potent shadow in the consciousness of the race. It is the shadow of a spirit that is yet unborn, but is preparing for its birth. This material world of ours, besides its fully embodied things of the present, is peopled by such powerful shadows, ghosts of things dead, and the spirit of things yet unborn. The ghosts of things dead are very troublesome actualities, and they now abound. Ghosts of dead religions, dead arts, dead moralities, dead political theories, which still claim either to keep their rotting bodies or to animate partly the existing body of things. Repeating obstinately their sacred formulas of the past, they hypnotize backward-looking minds and daunt even the progressive portion of humanity. But there are, too, those unborn spirits which are still unable to take a definite body, but are already mind-born and exist as influences of which the human mind is aware, and to which it now responds in a desultory and confused fashion. The religion of humanity was mind-born in the 18th century, the Manasa Pudra. Footnote: mind-born child, an idea and expression of Indian Puranic cosmology, of the rationalist thinkers who brought it forward as a substitute for the formal spiritualism of ecclesiastical Christianity. It tried to give itself a body in positivism, which was an attempt to formulate the dogmas of this religion, but on too heavily and severely rationalistic a basis for acceptance even by an age of reason. Humanitarianism has been its most prominent emotional result. Philanthropy, social service, and other kindred activities have been its outward expression of good works. Democracy, socialism, pacifism are to a great extent its byproducts, or at least owe much of their vigor to its inner presence. The fundamental idea is that mankind is the Godhead to be worshipped and served by man, and that the respect, the service, the progress of the human being and human life are the chief duty and the chief aim of the human spirit. No other idol, neither the nation, the state, the family, nor anything else ought to take its place. They are only worthy of respect so far as they are images of the human spirit and enshrine its presence and aid its self-manifestation. But where the cult of these idols seeks to usurp the place of the spirit, and makes demands inconsistent with its service, they should be put aside. No injunctions of old creeds, religious, political, social, or cultural, are valid when they go against its claims. Science even, though it is one of the chief modern idols, must not be allowed to make claims contrary to its ethical temperament and aim, for science is only valuable insofar as it helps and serves by knowledge and progress the religion of humanity. War, capital punishment, the taking of human life, cruelty of all kinds, whether committed by the individual, the state, or society, not only physical cruelty, but moral cruelty, the degradation of any human being or any class of human beings under whatever specious plea or in whatever interest, the oppression and exploitation of man by man, of class by class, of nation by nation, and all those habits of life and institutions of society of a similar kind, which religion and ethics formerly tolerated or even favored in practice, whatever they might do in their ideal rule or creed, are crimes against the religion of humanity, abominable to its ethical mind, forbidden by its primary tenets, to be fought against always, in no degree to be tolerated. Man must be sacred to man, regardless of all distinctions of race, creed, color, nationality, status, political or social advancement. The body of man is to be respected, made immune from violence and outrage, fortified by science against disease and preventable death. The life of man is to be held sacred, preserved, strengthened, ennobled, uplifted. The heart of man is to be held sacred also, given scope, protected from violation, from suppression, from mechanization, freed from belittling influences. The mind of man is to be released from all bonds, allowed freedom and range and opportunity, given all its means of self-training and self-development, and organized in the play of its powers for the service of humanity. And all this, too, is not to be held as an abstract or pious sentiment, but given full and practical recognition in the persons of men and nations and mankind. This, speaking largely, is the idea and spirit of the intellectual religion of humanity. One has only to compare human life and thought and feeling a century or two ago with human life, thought, and feeling in the pre-war period to see how great an influence this religion of humanity has exercised and how fruitful a work it has done. It accomplished rapidly many things which Orthodox religion failed to do effectively, largely because it acted as a constant intellectual and critical solvent, an unsparing assailant of the thing that is, and an unflinching champion of the thing to be, faithful always to the future, while Orthodox religion allied itself with the powers of the present, even of the past, bound itself by its pact with them, and could act only at best as a moderating but not as a reforming force. Moreover, this religion has faith in humanity and its earthly future, and can therefore aid its earthly progress, while the orthodox religions looked with eyes of pious sorrow and gloom on the earthly life of man, and were very ready to bid him bear peacefully and contentedly, even to welcome its crudities, cruelties, oppressions, tribulations, as a means for learning to appreciate and for earning the better life which will be given us hereafter. Faith, even an intellectual faith, must always be a worker of miracles, and this religion of humanity, even without taking bodily shape, or a compelling form, or a visible means of self-effectuation, was yet able to effect comparatively much of what it set out to do. It, to some degree, humanized society, humanized law and punishment, humanized the outlook of man on man, abolished legalized torture, and the cruder forms of slavery, raised those who were depressed and fallen, gave large hopes to humanity, stimulated philanthropy and charity, and the service of mankind, encouraged everywhere the desire of freedom, put a curb on oppression, and greatly minimized its more brutal expressions. It had almost succeeded in humanizing war, and would perhaps have succeeded entirely, but for the contrary trend of modern science. It made it possible for man to conceive of a world free from war as imaginable, even without waiting for the Christian millennium. At any rate, this much change came about that, while peace was formerly a rare interlude of constant war, war became an interlude, if a much too frequent interlude, of peace, though as yet only of an armed peace. That may not be a great step, but still it was a step forward. It gave new conceptions of the dignity of the human being, and opened new ideas and new vistas of his education, self-development, and potentiality. It spread enlightenment. It made man feel more his responsibility for the progress and happiness of the race. It raised the average self-respect and capacity of mankind. It gave hope to the serf, self-assertion to the downtrodden, and made the laborer in his manhood the potential equal of the rich and powerful. True, if we compare what is with what should be, the actual achievement with the ideal, all this will seem only a scanty work of preparation. But it was a remarkable record for a century and a half, or a little more, and for an unembodied spirit, which had to work through what instruments it could find, and had as yet no form, habitation, or visible engine of its own concentrated workings. But perhaps it was in this that lay its power and advantage, since that saved it from crystallizing into a form and getting petrified, or at least losing its more free and subtle action. But still, in order to accomplish all its future, this idea and religion of humanity has to make itself more explicit, insistent, and categorically imperative. For otherwise, it can only work with clarity in the minds of the few, and with the mass it will be only a modifying influence, but will not be the rule of human life. And so long as that is so, it cannot entirely prevail over its own principal enemy. That enemy, the enemy of all real religion, is human egoism. The egoism of the individual, the egoism of class and nation. These it could for a time soften, modify, force to curb their more arrogant, open, and brutal expressions, oblige to adopt better institutions, but not to give place to the love of mankind, not to recognize a real unity between man and man. For that essentially must be the aim of the religion of humanity, as it must be the earthly aim of all human religion: love, mutual recognition of human brotherhood, a living sense of human oneness, and practice of human oneness in thought, feeling, and life. The ideal, which was expressed first some thousands of years ago in the ancient Vedic hymn, and must always remain the highest injunction of the Spirit within us to human life upon earth. Till that is brought about, the religion of humanity remains unaccomplished. With that done, the one necessary psychological change will have been effected, without which no formal and mechanical, no political and administrative unity can be real and secure. If it is done, that outward unification may not even be indispensable, or if indispensable, it will come about naturally, not, as it now seems likely to be, by catastrophic means, but by the demand of the human mind, and will be held secure by an essential need of our perfected and developed human nature. But this is the question, whether a purely intellectual and sentimental religion of humanity will be sufficient to bring about so great a change in our psychology. The weakness of the intellectual idea, even when it supports itself by an appeal to the sentiments and emotions, is that it does not get at the center of man's being. The intellect and the feelings are only instruments of the being, and they may be the instruments of either its lower and external form or of the inner and higher man, servants of the ego or channels of the soul. The aim of the religion of humanity was formulated in the 18th century by a sort of primal intuition. That aim was, and it is still, to recreate human society in the image of three kindred ideas: liberty, equality, and fraternity. None of these has really been won, in spite of all the progress that has been achieved. The liberty that has been so loudly proclaimed as an essential of modern progress is an outward, mechanical, and unreal liberty. The equality that has been so much sought after and battled for is equally an outward and mechanical, and will turn out to be an unreal equality. Fraternity is not even claimed to be a practicable principle of the ordering of life, and what is put forward as its substitute is the outward and mechanical principle of equal association, or, at the best, a comradeship of labor. This is because the idea of humanity has been obliged in an intellectual age to mask its true character of a religion, and a thing of the soul and the spirit, and to appeal to the vital and physical mind of man rather than his inner being. It has limited his effort to the attempt to revolutionize political and social institutions, and to bring about such a modification of the ideas and sentiments of the common mind of mankind as would make these institutions practicable. It has worked at the machinery of human life, and on the outer mind, much more than upon the soul of the race. It has labored to establish a political, social, and legal liberty, equality, and mutual help in an equal association. But though these aims are of great importance in their own field, they are not the central thing. They can only be secure when founded upon a change of the inner human nature and inner way of living. They are themselves of importance only as a means for giving a greater scope and a better field for man's development towards that change, and when it is once achieved, as an outward expression of the larger inward life. Freedom, equality, brotherhood are three Godheads of the soul. They cannot be really achieved through the external machinery of society or by man, so long as he lives only in the individual and communal ego. When the ego claims liberty, it arrives at competitive individualism. When it asserts equality, it arrives first at strife, then at an attempt to ignore the variations of nature, and as the sole way of doing that successfully, it constructs an artificial and machine-made society, a society that pursues liberty as its ideal, is unable to achieve equality. A society that aims at equality will be obliged to sacrifice liberty. For the ego to speak of fraternity is for it to speak of something contrary to its nature. All that it knows is association for the pursuit of common egoistic ends, and the utmost that it can arrive at is a closer organization for the equal distribution of labor, production, consumption, and enjoyment. Yet is brotherhood the real key to the triple gospel of the idea of humanity. The union of liberty and equality can only be achieved by the power of human brotherhood, and it cannot be founded on anything else. But brotherhood exists only in the soul, and by the soul. It can exist by nothing else. For this brotherhood is not a matter either of physical kinship or of vital association or of intellectual agreement. When the soul claims freedom, it is the freedom of its self-development, the self-development of the divine in man in all his being. When it claims equality, what it is claiming is that freedom equally for all, and the recognition of the same soul, the same Godhead in all human beings. When it strives for brotherhood, it is founding that equal freedom of self-development on a common aim, a common life, a unity of mind and feeling, founded upon the recognition of this inner spiritual unity. These three things are, in fact, the nature of the soul. For freedom, equality, unity are the eternal attributes of the Spirit. It is the practical recognition of this truth. It is the awakening of the soul in man, and the attempt to get him to live from his soul and not from his ego, which is the inner meaning of religion. And it is that to which the religion of humanity also must arrive before it can fulfill itself in the life of the race.